Okay, I'm going to now introduce Phil Washington. He's the CEO of LA County Metro here. This is his facility we're in now, and again, I wanted to thank Phil and LAMTA for hosting us and welcoming us into their wonderful facility. They've done this a number of years in a row and have always been amazing to work with, and I want to thank Phil for that. Phil he was elected on March 12, 2015, unanimously selected as the CEO. He came to Los Angeles from Denver, where he was assistant general manager for nearly 10 years prior to being named CEO in 2009. The interesting part about Phil's career is the work he did in Denver, where they implemented the Fast Tracks program, one of the largest voter-approved transit expansion programs in the country. Phil was responsible for a total agency budget appropriation of $2.8 billion and managed more than $5 billion in active transportation expansion projects. Under his management, Denver's West Line Rail was completed under budget and 8 months earlier than scheduled. That's worth a clap right there. And the award-winning Denver Union Station was completed 5 months ahead of schedule. And we've had great presentations about that. So the great thing about Phil coming to LA is at a time when the region and the citizens just voted to tax themselves $120 billion, and Measure M, to pay for endless expansions of the metro system and all that. So the money's locked in for many decades, and Phil is taking charge of it all, and I'm sure we'll have the same kind of great success here with projects on time and or under budget and on time. So with that, please welcome Phil Washington.
Well, thank you so much, Andy, and want to welcome everyone here to Metro. Hopefully, we've made your stay comfortable. I don't know did we put any food out there or coffee? We did. Oh, we did. All right. Okay. All right. Good. Excellent. So let me start by talking a little bit about our reaction to some of the national news on infrastructure. And then I want to talk just a little bit about what we're doing here at Metro and the challenges that we're facing here at Metro. I was just in Washington. I just got back yesterday, as a matter of fact, and was actually talking to a group called the Eno Foundation. Some of you may have heard of the Eno Foundation, their senior leadership course, and was talking about some of the issues and challenges that we're facing on the national infrastructure front. We have been reviewing some of the infrastructure ideas and plans coming out of Washington right now. We are a little bit concerned about them. Obviously, I know you are as well, especially in a place like Southern California and our ports, where 40% of the nation's goods come through the Los Angeles ports. And our highways, especially specific highways like 710 South that come out of the ports, are bearing the brunt, in my opinion, for the entire country in terms of the trucks that come out of the ports and really tearing up streets and highways. And so when I hear people say that this is a local issue, I really cringe, because again, we are bringing or 40% of the nation's goods are coming through the LA ports. And so we should have some federal assistance with regard to those streets and roads down there where the trucks are coming out. And so we've been very, very vocal in our thoughts about how we should be able to realize more federal funding on our various projects, whether it be highway, whether it be transit, and so we stand by that. So we look forward to voicing what our thoughts are on the National Infrastructure Plan. I will say one of the things that we've pointed to is the new tax reform bill as well. The new tax reform bill that lowers the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. And our thinking is that we want to go out and first educate those corporations who have this big windfall of money and really appeal to them that you should be investing in infrastructure. But I find that we have to educate these corporations on what that looks like. What does a P3, in the case of even high-speed rail or commuter rail or just straight transit, what does that look like in the infrastructure space and how they can invest and bring equity to the table? I contend that with a corporate tax rate going from 35% to 21%, that there is no better place to invest than infrastructure if you're a corporation. Now, I'm going to start with the idea with these corporations that it is your civic duty to invest. You think that'll work with no rate of return? I don't know. But that's what I'm going to start with, because I do think that it is their civic duty to invest in infrastructure. And so we're going to start with that, and we are looking, there's 53 of the nation's Fortune 500 companies here in California. So we're going to meet with those 53 first, and again, educate them on what investing in infrastructure looks like. Now, that sounds like a simple thing, but I think that we have to educate them on what that looks like. What does it look like to invest and bring equity to the table in an express lane project or a managed lane project? Or what does it look like to bring equity to the table on a transit P3, a design, build, finance, operate, maintain arrangement with payback through availability payments? What does that look like is what we want to educate the private sector on. And a lot of times we think they know, but they don't. And so you will probably hear things like that. Let me talk just a little bit about what we're doing here at LA Metro and what our plans are and how we're going about doing those things. First, I'll talk just a little bit about what our goals, our desired outcomes by 2028. And there's been a lot of talk. Andy talked about Measure M. Yes, Measure M, I think all of you probably are aware of that, a new half-cent sales tax that will generate about $860 million a year here in LA County, $120 billion over the first 40 years, and with no sunset. And this really gets to our contention that transportation is an ongoing need. I mean, no one would dream of not paying for education, you know what I mean, or education having a sunset. Transportation is an ongoing need, and that is how we sold the no sunset provision, because it is a ongoing need in this country that we will continue to have to pay for. And so the voters of LA County understood that, they got that, and of course this measure was passed 71%, a little over 71%. That is incredible. It's incredible when you think about that. But not only that, but if you look around the country in November of 2016, 70% of the sales tax initiatives were successful. Over 70%. So what that tells me is that people at the local level understand the need to invest in their infrastructure. They get that. It's Congress that doesn't get it. And, you know, I always get in trouble when I, get up, but, hey, this is real. I mean, the local self-help regions around the country, those voters actually get it. And they got it here in Southern California. So desired outcomes by 2028. Well, 2028, that's the Olympics, if you didn't know. The Olympics will be here in LA. And so we have been really focusing on what are our desired outcomes by 2028. Well, a couple of things. We want to double the total usage of transportation modes other than driving alone. Now that includes transit, walking, biking, shared ride, and carpool modes. We want to double the total usage of transportation modes other than SOVs or driving alone. And in order to do that, we need to really focus on a number of things. We need to focus on improving our average speed of our bus service. We want to improve the average speed on the county's bus network by 30%. We want to provide access to high-quality mobility service within a 10-minute walk from every home in LA County. We want to reduce maximum wait times for any trip to 15 minutes. We want to provide convenient and dependable options for bypassing congestions on streets and highways. So we have some lofty goals and desired outcomes by 2028. Now, some of these goals, we are not sort of the sole decision maker on some of these things, but what I contend is that we can raise the issue. Even though we're not in charge of all of these things, we can raise the issue. We can increase capacity for non-single occupancy vehicle modes. How do we increase the sort of the capacity for those? How do we improve quality of our existing transit system? That's in our control. How do we deal with the state of good repair issues that are out there, making sure that we take care of what we build? How do we improve security? How do we focus on prevention and partnership? How do we improve the customer experience? How do we do all of these things? How do we create jobs and career pathways for the industry as well? So these are goals that we have and that we are going to push towards in our strategic plan as we move forward. And they're very, very aggressive and they're very, very ambitious goals. Now, we also have what we call a 28 by 2028 initiative. So what we have said, and our board has approved this initiative, to complete 28 projects by 2028. Now, other than that being very gimmickry, 28 by 2028, it's real in my mind. And it is a mission that me and my team have been given to finish these projects. Now, some of these projects are from Measure R, the previous Measure R. Some of them are from Measure M. Some of the projects are within the 10-year window of this 2028 because we're talking 10 years. Some of them are within that window already in terms of cash flow and Measure M and Measure R money that will come in, but some of them are not. And some of them are what I like to call aspirational projects. They're outside of the cash flow window of 10 years. And so they will need private sector help. They will need, I like to joke, manna from heaven. And in order for us to do those projects. And so you will hear that term 28 by 2028 often If you hear, not just here in Southern California, but all over the country, these are 28 projects that we want to complete by 2028. Some of those projects are transit projects, some of those projects are highway projects, some of those projects are bus rapid transit projects. So we can get you a list of all of those projects. Again, some of them we need help in completing, which is why our unsolicited proposal policy is so important that we initiated a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. The other thing that we want to push forward and have been pushing forward is progress in our public-private partnership program. Now, some of the projects on that 28 by 2028 list are assumed to be P3s. And we were so bold as to, when we took Measure M to the voters, we actually put in the plan examples or candidates for P3 projects. So we listed all the projects, and we actually put in that Measure M ordinance projects that were candidates for P3s, because we wanted to be transparent, we wanted to be open on things that we wanted to pursue for P3. So we put it in there. And so there's going to be opportunities, and there are opportunities for the private sector to help us through either bidding on projects or bringing us unsolicited proposals. Now, a couple of them I'll just mention. One called the West Santa Ana branch, which is about a 22-mile line coming from some of the southeastern cities, Artesia, up to the downtown LA area. I think it's a prime P3 opportunity. It is a standalone line of about 22 miles. It has independent utility. It has, it can go all the way to a design, build, finance, operate, maintain arrangement. And so we are in the throes of that project right now. We want the private sector to look at that. We're going to have what we call a market sounding here in the next few months for the private sector to tell us what they think about that project before we put out a request for qualifications or an RFQ. So we're moving on that project. Now, the challenge here is that project in Measure M is sort of separated, and it has two phases within Measure M. The first phase of the project, the money comes early in Measure M, and then the second phase or tranche of that project, the money comes a little bit later. And there is a 7-year gap between phases. And so what I'm challenging the private sector to help us with is, how do I narrow that gap to build that project as one and not in two phases? All right, everybody follow me? And so these are the kinds of things. We have another, the Sepulveda Pass, or the Sepulveda Transit Corridor. One of my board members goes crazy when I call it the Sepulveda Pass. I'm like, well, it is Sepulveda. It's the Sepulveda Pass. But we want to do a P3 on that as well. And so we're looking at how we can do that project and bring it all the way down to the airport, actually. So there's a lot of opportunity, and those are just two examples. Other things that we're focusing on is our bus service. Our bus service, 70% of our ridership is the bus. And we move about between 1.2 and 1.3 million people a day here. I think we are number 3 behind New York and Chicago. We're about to overcome Chicago as we build out our systems. Anybody from Chicago here? I know Rick Harness just talked about, I'm from Chicago too. I'm from the south side of Chicago. And so we're about to overtake Chicago, and you know I love that. But 1.2, 1.3 million people a day, 70% of that is on our buses. And so we must, first of all, improve the bus speeds. Now, our buses are in some of the same traffic as cars out here. But how do we improve our bus speeds? Our goal is to increase it by 30%. And so we are doing what we call a next-gen bus restructuring service plan. We are looking at the entire county, and we are asking the question, are our buses going to the right business centers? Are they going to the right residential clusters? We're looking at all of our bus lines, all of our bus service in this entire county, and changing what we need. Now, we tweak our bus service, 3 times a year? Most transit agencies do that, but they're tweaks. What we're talking about has not been done in over 20 years here at Metro, of looking at our entire system and making adjustments to our entire system, or right-sizing our service on the street is what I call it. And looking at that and doing that study with equity in mind, with all of these factors that we have in the most populous county in the country in mind as we move forward. So you will hear about that. It will get to the decline in ridership that we have been experiencing primarily on our bus side. And this is a national thing. This is a national challenge with regard to the decline in ridership. I think the only region that is increasing in ridership is Seattle right now. And so this is a national thing. We were happy to work with the UCLA on their study on declining ridership. And if you haven't gotten a copy of that, I will encourage you to get a copy of that study that Brian Taylor and the UCLA folks did that talked about the factors involved with declining ridership. And they point to, as a primary reason for the decline, is auto purchases. Auto purchases. Over a 10-year period, 2.8 million more people came to Southern California. And during that same period, there were 2.1 additional auto purchases. That's almost 1 car per person. That's pretty incredible. But it's cheap to own a car out here, right? There's no, you don't have to worry about rust. I mean, you know, it's not like Chicago or back east where it's snowing and they put the salt on the road and all of a sudden you got a hole in your floorboard. You know what I mean? I mean, if the car is running out here in Southern California, you could drive it for the rest of your life. You know what I mean? You don't have to worry about rust and all. It's cheap. And the auto industry, they've done a very, very good job. I mean, there's 0% loans. You can walk in and they may pay you to take a car out of there. I don't know. It's crazy. So we're dealing with auto purchases as the primary reason for decline in ridership. And I would also point to the affordable housing issue. The affordable housing issue that is pushing people further and further out and away from the urban core to find affordable housing. That is part of this issue. So, I mean, you know, you push folks further and further out. It costs us more to put bus service or rail service to where these traditional transit riders are. You know, in many cases, transit agencies cannot expand their service, and so the folks go out and buy a car because they almost have to. And so these issues are big challenges for us, and I would not just say that they're challenges of ours alone. There are challenges of the transportation industry. A couple other quick thoughts, and then maybe we can do a few questions. Andy, I don't know. The career pathways. I am very, very concerned. I've been concerned for many years about the lack of a qualified workforce to do the infrastructure build out and rebuilding that we need to do in this country. And I talk about it as much as I can around the country because I think it is a matter of national significance. It's really a national emergency. It really is. When you think about the amount of infrastructure work that we need to do in this country, when you think about just here in Southern California, we just passed Measure M. We just passed Measure M a year and a half ago. We've got a new football stadium being built in Inglewood. We've got SB1, Senate Bill SB1 that was passed, the increase in the tax bill here in the state of California. We've got cranes. I heard someone say that the crane is the new California bird. Cranes all over downtown. We've got all of this stuff. And then in the meantime, we've got highways and bridges that are deteriorating. We have natural disasters in your Houstons, your Puerto Ricos, you got flooding. Now, this is tearing up infrastructure. We've got all of this stuff happening, and I'm concerned that we do not have the qualified workforce to address all of the issues and to do the work that needs to be done in this country for infrastructure. I mean, if the federal government says tomorrow that we've got $2 trillion in infrastructure we're going to put out, wow. I mean, how are we going to build it all? And so that is a big concern of mine, which is why we have and are in the process of putting together a career pathway model in infrastructure. And we are starting from cradle to grave. The cradle being, we're going to start a transportation school out here, grades 6 to 12. We are in the throes of this right now that focuses on the transportation disciplines that are hardest to fill. We are already looking at a site in South LA. We are going to partner with at-risk kids for this school. We are going to partner with DCFS. We are going to partner with that population of people that their families may not have the skill set to do this kind of work. We want to teach them. This whole pathway from cradle to grave, there's a number of things along the way. And then the grave part of this pathway is the CEO position. There you go. That's cradle to grave. And this is something that we think that the private sector should help us with, because we see this, a school, grade 6 to 12, internship programs, we see those things at the cradle end of this as an entry point for transportation government institutions to recruit from, and also the private sector. These are skill sets that we need. We plan to wrap supportive services around the participants that come out of this program, whether it's social services or whatever. We're going to wrap all that around the people coming out of these entryways. You can expect to see goals on projects from our WIN program, our Workforce Initiative Now program that we are putting together, our Career Pathways model. You can expect to see goals, just like small business goals, coming out of that. We have to set up and structure career pathways for this industry, or we are going to be facing challenges where we cannot build the infrastructure that we're begging for in terms of the money. And so you will hear that is a huge piece of our agenda here at LA Metro. And then lastly, let me just talk about high-speed rail, because this is the high-speed rail conference. You know, all of this applies to high-speed. Listen, I am, and I told Brian Kelly, and I know Brian Kelly couldn't make it down today, but I am a huge supporter of high-speed rail. We got to have it. We absolutely have to have it. I'm going to speak at a conference in Spain next month. And I'll probably get on one of those trains. You know what I mean? I mean, you know, I'm gonna get on one of those trains because I can't get on one here. And so we are doing and working with high-speed rail to put the infrastructure in place here at Union Station to accommodate high-speed rail. And so those are the conversations that we're having. We must figure out how to get high-speed rail in this country. We cannot be left behind in this area. So I am a huge advocate for it, and we'll do what we can to make sure that Union Station here is ready for the arrival of high-speed rail. So let me stop there, and maybe we can do a few questions, and you can tell me when to stop. Any questions of me? Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you name a few of the specific rail projects from among the 28? Because I believe there are some both heavy rail metro and light rail, and of course the downtown streetcar. Could you tell us a little about the rail elements of the 28 428?
Sure.
Thank
And
you.
I didn't bring the list down here with me, but
Oh, just off the top of your head.
yeah. So now some of them, as I said, are from Measure R and of course Measure M. So some of them are in construction right now, and they will happen in a 10-year period. Crenshaw Line. The Crenshaw Line, we are almost 80% complete with that Crenshaw Line. And by the way, on the Crenshaw Line, I've been talking about what that community may look like, you know, when it's done. It's going to be an incredible social study when we're done with that line. I don't know what the community, this is a historic African-American community, and I'm just really curious what's going to happen there. We have, of course, the regional connector on that list. The regional connector is the downtown circulator that we're building here that's really going to be a game changer for the whole region and facilitate a one-seat ride all the way from Azusa, or eventually Claremont, all the way down to Long Beach. I mean, this is an incredible game changer. The airport station and the airport connection is on that line. The Sepulveda Transit Corridor is on that line. The San Fernando Valley Transit Corridor, whether that be a BRT or a light rail, is on that list. The managed lane system throughout the county is on that list. The Purple Line, all 3 phases are on that list. And by the way, the Purple Line Section 3, I didn't mention that, but we're moving ahead with that. Now, we need some federal dollars, but we're moving ahead with that Section 3. We're going to put out the tunneling contract. We're going to take that to our board probably in May. What else? The Vermont corridor is on that list. The Vermont corridor, whether it be a bus rapid transit or a rail, it's on that list to be finished by 2028. There is the 710 South on that list. Some of you may have been reading, and we just took to our board last week what we're going to do on the 710 South. Whether we do, the board approved actually some improvements at the interchanges, and eventually we may get to widening the 710 South. The 710 North, some of the improvements that the cities are bringing to us is on that list. So there's a number of things on that list. We'll bring it to you. The Gold Line East Side extensions are on that list. I'm not sure if both of them are on that list, but I know one of them is on that list. So we'll get you that whole list. Yes, sir. The question was private dollars versus federal dollars. What is that? Well, I think on the private dollars, we are encouraging the use of private equity on our projects. We understand it's not free money. I mean, you know, we have to educate folks, unless you all want to give me free money. We know that there's a payback you know, out there for any equity that comes to these projects, but we're encouraging that so we can accelerate projects. Now, in this current environment, it's very hard for us to make exact assumptions on federal dollars. And, you know, I'm being, you know, politically sensitive. But, you know, people always ask me, well, Phil, what's your assumption on federal dollars? Well, this is an uncertain time. It's a very uncertain time. So we are being very careful on our assumptions. Now, we have made assumptions for federal dollars in our Measure M plan as we built that Measure M plan. So we do have some assumptions. For example, Section 3 of the Purple Line, there's an assumption for $1.3 billion. In that Section 3, that project is about $3 billion. There's an assumption of $1.3 billion in there. The key thing here is that as a self-help region that we are, we're not going to the federal government empty-handed. So what we're saying is, hey, listen, we got money, and as a matter of fact, we are entitled to a return from the federal government, considering that the state of California is the largest state in this country and sends more money to the federal government than anybody else. And, you know, I don't know if y'all want to give me an amen on that or what, but that's all right. Yes. Yes.
Good morning, Phil. Last week I attended the P3 conference in Dallas.
Yes.
And it was well attended by almost everybody in the industry. One of the things that I came out from that meeting is that there's a little, the industry wants to see LA Metro come up with a project that pretty much move forward into an execution stage so it can set an example for the rest of the program and also to the idea that you just put in regarding the tax differences and invest in the industry. So that's one thing that I'm really seeing it as a major challenge for LA Metro. Mm-hmm. The other point that I came up with from the conference is that we need a champion when it comes to P3. The setup in public agencies does not support it for a lot of reasons. And in every successful case that was discussed in the meeting, there had to be a champion within the agency to take it from the first stage to the execution stage. So that's one thought for you. And the second one is regarding the WIN program and getting the staff or getting the workforce to be able to produce these projects. You have addressed it when it comes to labor very successfully, but we're still missing a very similar program when it comes to professional services. And part of the challenge that I'm seeing is the procurement guidelines really does not allow us as consultants to come in and bring in what I would consider junior staff to be part of the proposal, train them through the program, or train them on the project and have them be more viable for future projects.
Right.
Any comments?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So let me, the challenge of implementing P3s. So what I've said is we're not going to do one P3. We're going to do multiple P3s here at LA Metro. Now, the key is moving these things forward, right? getting through the environmental piece. Now, I mentioned the West Santa Ana branch. I mean, we're at the same time moving through the environmental. Now, I could put out an RFQ or an RFP without getting in any of the environmental or not getting further along in the environmental. And then you know what I would get? I would get bad proposals. That's what I would get. You know, I would get proposals because we're not further along on the environmental, you don't know really what to respond to in the proposal. And so people think that we're sort of dragging our feet. We're trying to get as far along as we can in the environmental so you will have something viable to bid on. Do you follow me? And so don't take that, what could be perceived as a delay as we're not doing anything. We're actually, we have what I call a unicorn schedule. That's what my staff is calling it. Because they brought me a schedule and I said, no, go back. I want something that's tighter. And they're calling it a unicorn schedule because it's like unheard of in terms of the acceleration that I'm asking for. So we are moving forward, and I'm under no illusion that we have challenges in our organization and pushback in our organization. In any government agency, it is tough to get people off the dime that's been here 25 years doing it one way. Listen, I'm not stupid. You know, it's my job, though, to turn the ship around, and we are doing that. And if you look at our schedule for the two P3s that we are starting on now, that being the West Santa Ana branch and the Sepulveda Pass, you will see that that's happening. Now, on the Sepulveda Transit Corridor project, we are doing what's called a PDA, development agreement, to bring on the private sector much sooner than we're doing on West Santa Ana, because what we believe is that on the Sepulveda, we can bring the private sector in to help us with the development of that project since it's so complicated. That is why you're going to see an RFP out there on the street within the next 6 months on Sepulveda. Okay, so we're moving on this. The last thing I'll say about the WIN, we're looking at the professional services piece. We've signed the agreements with the workforce development boards all over the region and the county. We just signed agreements with the city of LA and the county. So you're going to see that moving on professional services as well. Okay, can we do two more because so let's start here. Yes.
I'm Manuel Valle, the Trade Commissioner of the Embassy of Spain.
Yes, sir.
Are you considering making Andy the happiest man in the world, advancing to 28th, the line Los Angeles-San Francisco, to show the world your modernity with a high-speed line during the Olympic Games?
Well, I mean, if that was under my purview, I would make him the happiest man in the world. But that's actually not under my purview. My job on the high-speed rail side is to get this building ready. And that is what we're doing with the help of high-speed rail. So, hope that answers your question. I'll see you in Spain. Yeah.
Perfect lead into my question, which is about Union Station. I mean, it's the hub for your system, but also the hub for high-speed rail when it gets here. And it's a P3 potential here. So can you give us a little more vision of what you may be thinking for Union Station, more like what you've done in Denver, how you mix in state money with what you're doing, with what the private sector could do here as part of a partnership?
Yes. So we have put together, almost on the back of a napkin, the finance funding plan for Union Station. I was just talking to our folks upstairs about an hour ago about how we think that we need to bring on some consultant help to help with that funding plan. The Union Station in Colorado that we were able to pull off, I call that, a friend of mine actually called that funding and financing plan a funding lasagna, because we had 11 different funding and financing methods that we used on Union Station in Denver. The same thing will apply here. So we're looking to bring on some help to help with that funding plan. We've got sort of a back of the napkin kind of thing with TIFIA loans, with RIF loans, with enhanced infrastructure finance district revenues for the development around Union Station. We've got a lot of ideas. We're going to need some consultant help. Lastly, how does this look? How does Union Station look here? I think it has to be a run-through facility, because right now we have a dead end. We have a dead end here, and I'm not saying that in a negative way. But trains can only come in here, and we need through tracks and all of that to really shave off travel time. There's two plans out there. There's an at grade, there's an above grade. We're looking at those things, and that is going to be tied to the funding plan as we move forward. But this place has tremendous potential inside and out. It really, really does. And so I think what you're going to see here as we work with high-speed rail and have some certainty on funding that's coming in, I think you're going to see some renderings and some draw-ups that's going to be very, very impressive. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Andy.